Good morning, everyone. As Owen was saying, this morning we have such a great opportunity to get a snapshot of some of these wonderful hard grafting and community building innovations taking place in our United Diocese. Looking at church that's beyond, but also within. And hopefully this morning this will be a place that we will be informed, but also inspired. But let me start by saying thank you to Archbishop Jackson, Reverend Heaslip, Reverend Breen, and also to welcome Archbishop Welby and Caroline today. It's great to see you again. So please put your hands together to our four panelists, Reverend Robert Klebens, Reverend Abigail Sines, Maria Feeney, and Eddie Darcy. We're going to start this morning with Maria Feeney, and you've written a book called Come and See, and I just would love you to articulate a little bit more about what that book is about.
Okay, good morning, Your Graces, and everybody here this morning. My name is Maria Feeney. It's my honour and privilege to be here with you this morning to talk about the Come and See initiative here in the United Diocese of Dublin and Glendalough. Before I begin, I would like to take the opportunity to offer my sincerest thanks to Archbishop Michael Jackson for his invitation to be here this morning. And I would also like to extend my thanks to Reverend Owen Heaslip and all those here in St. Catherine's for hosting this morning's event. My esteemed colleague, co-author and ecumenical canon of Christ Church Cathedral, Dr. David Toohey, and myself undertook research to examine how the invitation to discipleship was undertaken here. The findings are documented in our book, Come and See, Growing in the Image and Likeness of God, and I am delighted to be able to present Your Grace with a copy of that this morning.
First question, Maria, where's my copy?
You should have picked one up last month.
Harsh.
So Come and See was an invitation to self-discovery and discipleship and is an ongoing initiative. It was an attempt to enable and empower people to identify with their faith through engagement in intentional discipleship. It was also an attempt to declericalize the concepts of mission and discipleship by offering people and their communities the freedom to explore and embrace their own faith in new and creative ways. Constructively aligning the 5 marks of mission to the Come and See invitation was a core element of its design. For many, the biblical base and the scriptural source of the 5 marks was very important. While many parishes throughout the diocese were already engaged in wonderful activities, using the 5 marks of mission meant that they were able to distill and directly align their efforts to Scripture as they continued or embarked on new journeys of self-discovery and discipleship. One parishioner explained, "I'm enthusiastic about them and about Come and See because they come from the Gospel." Another explained, "The 5 marks are a rolling thing, ongoing. They should be part of our DNA." While someone else said, "I like the 5 marks. They are building blocks for being church and being disciple. They're a beautiful vision." The 5 marks represented action words, ways to proclaim and practice intentional discipleship that are central to the concept of mission. We witnessed endless opportunities for using the 5 marks to tell, teach, tend, transform, and treasure, to prompt engagement and service to and with others across the diocese. Many people felt empowered when they realised that they could reimagine how they could go about engaging in discipleship in their local communities according to the Scriptures. And this relates to another important finding. The 5 marks of mission are not a one-size-fits-all framework. Their pliability means that they can be localised in the most fitting and fruitful ways so that people and parishes are responding directly to their own nuanced and specific needs. We also saw how they have the power to embrace all demographic and generational groups and then bring them all together. For the clergy and laity alike, the 5 marks emerged as a gift that keep on giving. Numerous activities were undertaken across the diocese, from bell ringing in Blessington to a graveyard biodiversity project for school children in Chapel Izzard, a Generation for Jesus youth group in Coolock, a baptism ceremony in Clontarf, in addition to a pilgrimage to the Holy Land during which one participant felt a real sense of Anglican commitment to social justice. And attending various worship events meant that people were out and about in the diocese. One of the slides is a photograph of parishioners from Rathfarnham Parish. In the historic grounds of Rathfarnham Castle, they planted a baptism tree to remember babies born and babies lost in their community, and who continued to be remembered every year in a commemoration service. Another slide showcases the beautiful treasure that Glendalough is in the United Diocese. Through Come and See, the Glendalough Camino, which is now linked to the Camino de Santiago, offers a profound opportunity for pilgrimage, reflection and prayer, and was and continues to be developed as an aid to discipleship. As we note in our book, pilgrimage is important because it brings people on two journeys. One physical, the journey to a sacred place, and one spiritual, a journey inward to meet God. The transformative power of pilgrimage was noted by one young woman. She outlined the impetus for undertaking a pilgrimage in the first place when she said, "I needed to tend to myself and that relationship with God." Pilgrimage, she explained, provided her with a changing moment for me, the realization that I wasn't present. This made her question, am I actually present in any part of my life? It really woke me up about how I would live in everyday life. Who you are on the Camino is who you are in everyday life, and that was a changing point. The Camino is not just a walking holiday, it's way more than just a walk. It's too special. Where it is, the energy of it, the churches, the beauty, it's more than just a walk. It's a spiritual journey. I truly felt God's presence on that journey and Him with me. Pilgrimage really brought me closer to God, and I felt His presence in my life. God is in every day, not just in church on Sunday. This brings me then to another interesting and related concept that emerged during the research and in conversation with another participant. For that individual, Come and See was a fabulous opportunity for thinking about modernising church, modernising worship. And this was also noted in recent research discussion groups among members of the Diocesan Synod last month. The busy lives people now have present a challenge for the Church to maintain programmes for involving parents and young people, for example. Recognising the difficulties and commitments that are keeping some people out of church, one member suggested that perhaps maybe we need to beam out into the community and into people's homes. Come and See, along with the 5 marks, is well placed to deliver on such innovative ideas. In fact, I was struck by one of the values of St. Catherine's Church here, that is, to live missionally, but also by their commitment to giving creative and faithful expression to the kingdom of God. And I think that is something that is the essence of and at the heart of Come and See and the 5 marks of mission in the United Diocese as we continue our efforts to grow in the image and likeness of God. Thank you very much.
Marie, thank you. The 5 marks were, again, they were tell,
teach, tend, transform, and treasure.
And how did you come up with those?
I didn't. You did. Back in the 80s, it was 1984, and they were to serve as a tool for mission and discipleship. And I think that was one of the strategic parts of the Come and See initiative here, was this application of the 5 marks to bring this tangible tool and make it available to everyone in their everyday lives, so that in the things that people were intuitively and already doing in the diocese could now be directly aligned to the scriptures.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Right, I'm going to move to Abigail. Good morning.
Good morning.
So this morning we're going to talk a little bit about what it is to be a cathedral or sanctuary.
Yes.
I love that word, sanctuary. It's such a good word. What does that mean to you and to others?
Cathedral of Sanctuary, so being a safe and a welcoming place for everyone. Yeah. A place where people can experience God's hospitality and our hospitality.
And so you're the Dean's Vicar there at Christ Church Cathedral,
Yes.
just up the road. Tell us more about the work you do there.
Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about our journey and how we became getting that designation of Cathedral of Sanctuary. We didn't intentionally set out on that, but in fact the journey for us was a journey of education, and it was a very appropriate and also a rightly challenging journey for us as we sought to extend the cathedral's ministry to engage with people who aren't normally present in the rhythm of choral services day by day, which is the mainstay of cathedral life for any cathedral. Our Dean places a high priority on the ministry of welcome. And so for us, this was a journey of reflecting theologically. And there's a deep well, of course, for us to draw on. Our foundation is formally named the Cathedral Church of the Most Holy Trinity. And in one of our side chapels, there hangs a large copy of the Rublev icon, the Three Visitors, which was commissioned by our current dean early on in his tenure. And when you stand in front of this beautiful golden icon, you see the three figures glancing gently at one another, and yet, somehow when you stand there looking at it, they're looking at you as well. And there's a space at the front for the table, and it's open, and you're almost invited in to be part of that gathering around the table. So this is a constant visual reminder for us in the cathedral of our identity and our essence, that we are supposed to be part of God's action of welcoming people to the table. We began to educate ourselves about the asylum process in Ireland and the problems of the direct provision system. This was going back to the year 2016. And so as we sought to engage around those issues, we asked representatives from City of Sanctuary Dublin to conduct some awareness-raising sessions with us and to help us think how the cathedral might take practical steps to welcome newcomers in our city, and especially those who are seeking sanctuary. From this starting point, we just needed to pound the pavement. We went out, we made cold calls, we sent invitations to some of the direct provision centres in Dublin and further afield. And we wanted just to offer them a guided tour of our cathedral and a chance to have tea, coffee and refreshments afterwards, and a chat in the cathedral crypt. We wanted also to explore other ways to be part of this public conversation, and so we took what at that time was really a leap of faith to announce that we would host a speaker series. We envisaged that these would be conversations that would be affirming for those who really needed a venue and weren't often given it to share their voice and speak about their experiences. Given that social isolation is a major factor of life in direct provision, we wanted to offer a space for meaningful conversation and for people to feel that they'd connected with someone. It seemed natural for us to call this "What's the Story?" This is the common greeting that you hear on Dublin city streets, and you will absolutely hear it if you're walking through the streets of the Liberties here where we're sitting right now. What's the story? As we were thinking about how we could help and facilitate people to connect, we wanted this to be empowering, confidence-building experience for speakers who maybe had never had the chance to speak publicly. This year we actually just held our third iteration of What's the Story this past October, and we'll continue to do so in the future as long as there seem to be personal stories that need a platform. As we sadly mark the 20th anniversary of the direct provision system, which was originally set up here as a 6-month emergency temporary measure, it indeed seems that there will still be stories that need to be shared. For us, that journey of education also led us to an introduction to the fantastic Ellie Kishombe. At that time, she was still an asylum seeker, and she was the amazing and incredibly articulate founder of Our Table, a social enterprise formed initially to highlight the lack of cooking facilities in direct provision centres. And as you could imagine yourself, if you've ever lived in an institutional setting for a short time, you can really be ground down in a routine when you're forced into it day by day, and you've no privacy for yourself and for your family, nor even the freedom to cook food that you would like to eat yourself. That kind of dehumanizing, institutionalizing living wears down on the mental health of those who live for extended periods of time in direct provision. And that waiting, unfortunately, can stretch for years due to the slow pace of bureaucracy. Our table has been able to cater a few events for us, and briefly even made the cathedral home for a pop-up cafe on our grounds last summer. And we're very happy to be able to maintain the friendship with Ellie and continue to support Our Table from time to time. As the Diocesan Cathedral, we've also made it a point to highlight and direct some of our resources towards the A Place to Call Home campaign, supporting the Irish Refugee Council's transitional housing work for those who are trying, in the face of very many structural barriers, to exit direct provision after they've received their status and to start a new life. In a way, for us, for this journey, though when we set out, it seemed to be a big question mark as to what exactly it would mean for us to pursue this path, I feel that we were following in the footsteps of our spiritual father, Abraham. In faith, we set out on a journey, not knowing where we were going. In that journey, we've received as a gift the stories of people who were often not listened to. We receive the gift of poetry, music, paintings, and food which we not otherwise experienced. We've had the privilege of sharing our beautiful spiritual home with those who have been so generous to share deeply personal things with us. And we hope that in the process, we have communicated to them a sense of value and dignity. We certainly are all the richer for what we have received, as we have sought to bring more people to the table.
Thank you, Abigail. Brilliant. We're going to move on to Rob here. One of the ministries that I like most because it involves coffee.
It does. It's very important.
I also love that you call this a social and spiritual enterprise. So could you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing in Kiltiernan?
Sure. Thank you for the chance to be here and talk a little bit about the project. Kiltiernan, just to root Kiltiernan on the map a little bit. Kiltiernan, I guess, historically would have been a little village just sort of in the outskirts of Dublin, and Kiltiernan Church of Ireland would have been a lovely, but very gentle village church there in a lovely community. But it's been very much caught in the tide of demographic change as the population of Dublin expands and as communities diversify. And it had to ask that question, well, what does that mean as a church for us? How do we speak into that? How do we allow ourselves to both be transformed by and to transform that? And it had been percolating in the minds of Kiltiernan people for a number of years to build a new centre. So when we built this lovely Kiltiernan Centre, we had a very clear sense that we didn't want it to turn into a parochial hall for parochial activities. But we also didn't just want it to be a community centre full of Pilates and yoga, and I'm not knocking Pilates and yoga, very important. But we wanted it to be a place with a very strong sense of identity, Christian identity. And we wanted it to be a place of ministry and mission that would allow us to meaningfully connect with the community around us that was changing and growing, and in many ways had become slightly alien to us. And as we dug into what that meant, this idea of the Gathering Grounds Cafe was born. And it's a very simple idea. The idea of the Gathering Grounds is that it would be a place that welcomes the whole community of Kiltiernan through its doors for coffee and conversation. And we take our coffee seriously. My wife is from Seattle and she is very involved in the cafe, so any coffee had to pass the Seattle test. But we have this line that we use where we say, the coffee's good, but it's not about the coffee. The idea of the Gathering Grounds for us is that it becomes a place where people can gather and connect. And we've been very mindful that idea of gathering is becoming a concept that is frequently lost as people are incredibly busy. And more so than ever, people are siloed into identity niche according to ages or whatever, and those places where people actually gather for meaningful conversation are becoming smaller and smaller. So we thought that's a place that we needed to focus. When people come into the Gathering Grounds, we hope that they are welcomed and received and listened to and have an experience of the generous nature of God who invites them to sit. And we believe that something spiritual happens when people drink coffee and when we break and butter scones together. Of course, people can just get a cup of coffee and have their own space, and that's fine. But one of the ideas of gathering for us is that we hope that we wouldn't just gather people, but we would gather ideas. And we would encourage people to innovate. And we would encourage people to try to find innovative and new ways to express their faith. And our mantra at the start was that it would take the idea to be very off the wall for us not to say yes. And in that we have seen lots of little things percolate. I'm full of coffee puns, forgive me. We saw lots of little things start to grow. We saw people sitting at tables and suddenly sharing a story, and for the first time ever in their lives having someone say, would it be okay for you if I prayed for that? Which for us was a groundbreaking concept. To see volunteers in our kitchen, sharing with other volunteers things that are going on in their lives. We try to use the arts in a very gentle way, so around the My Kingdom Come season or around Advent, we try to encourage there to be art in our gathering ground space that encourages people who come in just in a gentle way to explore and to take time. Sometimes in lovely ways, the things that happen in church start to bubble into the gathering grounds. So we had a Sunday where we had a prayer tree, where people in church could come forward and tie a little ribbon onto a tree to bring a prayer to God. And we took the tree into the gathering ground and we let it be there. And we encourage people to come for coffee in their own time, if they wanted to, just to go and make a prayer. But we find people engaging. We have a Sunday night at the gathering ground. And the idea of that is that, I suppose, it's the kind of cafe church model, but the idea of it is people can sit and have coffee and cake and conversation, but that we would invite someone to come and be interviewed who maybe would stretch people's thinking. And I always say, I'm not inviting someone to come and make a pitch for what they do. I'm not really interested in your pitch. I'm more interested in what inspires you to do the thing that you do. And it's finding places for people to tell a little bit of the story of what they do. We have a messy church that's grown very much out of the gathering ground, but it's about people of all ages. We find our seniors who have their 11:30 Eucharist during the week decided, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't meet in the church, but can we meet in the meeting room and then spill out into the gathering ground? And now we have a lunch set up for our seniors on a Tuesday. In terms of how it works, it does work as a social and spiritual enterprise. And the goal early on was that it would be self-sustaining. But we took a risk and we decided to make it, we run through a generosity box or an honesty box system, which I think tells part of our story. So the idea of that's simple. The idea of it is, listen, if you've had a bad day or if things are tough for you right now, this is on us. Come sit, drink, eat, just be part of what we are doing, gather with us. Now listen, if you've had a good day and you've had a good week, you might want to pay that forward and put a bit extra in. But whatever, it's a place where you come and you experience the generosity and the grace of God. We have one part-time position that runs through Profits Made from the gathering ground, but predominantly it's volunteer run. We have about 20 people in our parish now who are trained baristas. And that is wonderful. A great way of getting teenagers involved in the life of the community is to teach them how to make coffee. Yeah. But we have people of all ages. We have a kid who is 12 years old who comes in every morning at 7:30 before school to help with the baking of scones. We have a lady who is 85 years old who's been in that community since before most of the houses were there, and yet she is there every day. And she doesn't barista, by the way. Too bad. But she receives and she welcomes and she creates hospitality and she creates belonging. On a good day, and I'm probably going over my time here, on a good day... A little bit. Oh, sorry.
It's all good.
On a good day, we find we might have 80 to 100 people coming in, and they come in from all across the community. And the thing that's been wonderful for us as we continue on that journey is that they keep coming back, and we're delighted.
Thank you, Rob,
Thank
very
you.
much. Round of applause. Thank you. It's incredible the words that keep cycling through the conversation of belonging and gathering and connecting. I'm loving it. Your title, which I'm sure you're asked loads about at the Solus Project, is Head Gardener, which is fascinating to me. First of all, why that title, and then what is Solus Project?
Well, I suppose at one stage Solus did use the language of growth and the language of gardening as a way of trying to explain what we were about and how we were about it, you know. And
Do you like gardening?
Absolutely not. Unfortunately, I'm from the city. I live in a house that has a tiny garden which I'm not even allowed to touch. It's my wife's area of expertise. I'm absolutely useless at it.
So that aside.
Solus, yeah.
Yes.
So Solus Project, I suppose, the community in which the church here is situated, unfortunately, is also the community in Dublin that is probably the most marginalised part of Dublin. Every year the state produces colour-coded maps to highlight the areas of severe deprivation, and unfortunately the flat complexes in this particular community are painted the deepest blue, which is the highest level of deprivation. In relation to other areas such as education and schooling, we have a range of traditional old, quite small schools in the area, schools with lovely traditions, but unfortunately we also have the highest rate of early school dropout. And in terms of young people, the school league tables that are produced every year in terms of young people moving on to third level, less than 7% of the young people in the two secondary schools in this immediate area will go on to third level. You compare that to a secondary school like St Mary's a mile down the road where 88% will go on to third level. So there is massive inequality in terms of opportunity for young people in this area. And I suppose people associated with the church here initially saw that, and that Solus Project grew out of an intervention by some of the members of the church here to try and do something about that. The project then really took legs and grew when Graham Jones, a member of the church here and a volunteer in Solus Project, took an extremely courageous step to, I suppose, give up his job as a corporate lawyer. I presume, Louise, you had a mortgage and you have 3 kids and all that. So, I mean, that takes huge bravery and huge courage. Graham drove it on. And he also developed I think one of the things that Solus Project is very, very clear about in terms of our ethos is we try to work with the most marginalised member of community. Right. And in fact, the most marginalised members of the community in this area here are the young people caught up in the drug gangs, the drug violence, high levels of offending behaviour, and end up in prison. So again, if we're going to work with them, we had to be able to find those young people and work with them, and that's a big challenge. Yes. And I think that's, Solus Project is committed to that particular approach and that particular, I suppose one of the things that underlines our ethos is we want to work with the most marginalised, and once we make a commitment to them, we'll stick with that commitment. Nobody gets dropped out of Solus Project. We don't have any way of excluding somebody, and we work really, really hard to achieve that. So we have a number of projects. We have 5 strands really. We have a base strand, which means Solus Project staff and volunteers work in every local national school in the area and in 4 secondary schools. And we work with them in 5th class and 6th class to try and raise awareness around the potential that they have as young people and the potential they have to have a really good career or to go on to third level education. We also run a sports program there which is really an opportunity for us to build a relationship and for every single child in this community to understand who Solus Project are and what we're about. At the next level we have a mentoring program that actually operates here with support from Owen, thank God. 4 nights a week we have 62 teenagers who are all in second level schools in the area who require that bit of support to hang on in there in school. And every one of them has their individual volunteer, many of whom come through St. Catherine's and other churches. We have some full-time staff as well, and some of those young people will stay on that programme for up to 6 years. Our next layer then includes 3 after-school programmes that is working intensely with children from the flat complexes that really need it. So they come to us for 4 hours each day, they get a hot meal, they get homework support, they get some reading support, and they get a fun activity. And we're with them probably for 50 weeks of the year. And they are young people who are really, really struggling. Many of those young people, when they finish in the clubs, will come into our STEPUP program. So in fact, we will have some of those young people receiving support from Solus Project from the age of 6, probably to the age of 20. And I suppose our view at times is, for some of those young people, we can't change what goes on at home. If their mother is struggling with addiction, if there's massive poverty in the house, if there's a mental illness in the house, we can't really change that. So we do want to support them to be able to live and be educated and receive, or I suppose achieve their potential in their own community. So if we have to provide wraparound support for 15 years for some individual, we'll try and do that. Our next layer then of programs is programs which are, I suppose, the most challenging programs. So we target young men mostly in the community who are out of school from a fairly early age. We have a social enterprise called The Yard, which provides skills around wood turning, but is really also about building soft skills. And I suppose a real challenge for that program is finding pathways for those young people going forward. The group that we have in the Yard at the moment, unfortunately, many of them don't even have a junior cert, let alone a leaving cert. So obviously finding opportunities for them going forward is a real challenge. It also is a very, very poor reflection on the formal education system, that young people can be excluded not only from the school system but from the alternative school systems and just left there, you know. And then our final range of programs, which are our programs that target, we have 2 programs there. One of the things that Graham was always passionate about was young people in the prison system. For a period he worked as a solicitor in the children's court, and he recognised the same children and the same families going through it time and time again. So we have 2 programs there. One is the Compass programme, and we work in Mountjoy Prison and Wheatfield Prison. So we go in, we organise activity programs in both those prisons. We build a relationship with young men between 18 and 25, get to know them really well, and then offer them intensive support for maybe 3 or 4 years after they come out of prison. And that's a real challenge, and it's a challenge supporting that cohort of young people, many of whom are caught up in chronic drug use and homelessness and violence and difficulties in terms of damaged relationships with families. So it's a challenging piece of work. And then probably the most challenging piece of work we've taken on the last couple of years is we had identified that the Irish justice system has a system by which young people commit an offence. Their offence is referred to a national juvenile office, and they get an opportunity. 90% of them get an opportunity to be diverted from the justice system, so they go into what's called the diversion programs or the diversion projects. However, there's about 6 or 7% who are considered unsuitable. In other words, because they're chronic offenders, or they have refused to cooperate with the Gardaí, or the system just believes that there's really no future for them, they're going to go to prison. So these young people go before the courts and maybe end up in detention. So we looked for and sought support from the Irish youth system to run a programme for a cohort of young men from this community who are considered unsuitable for diversion because of the level of their offending. And I suppose for the past 2 years we've been working with a group of 20 young men, all who fall into that category, all who are before the courts, all who are possibly going to be in and out of detention, and we've committed ourselves to building a relationship with them and to working with them long term. Now that's a very, very challenging piece of work, and we're happy that we're making considerable progress. We have got to the point where those young people have begun to trust us, and we are recognising that they have suffered extreme trauma in their lives, and they have been very damaged, not only by the family circumstances, but by the state that is supposedly there committed to the protection of your children. Exclusion from school, exclusion from activities, exclusion from employment, even to some extent they have been excluded by the landlord in DCC from living in their own house. We recognise fully the damage and they're causing within their communities. We recognise they're probably the least popular group in the area, but from our point of view, they are also the most marginalised. So that's our challenge, is to work with them. I suppose there's a couple of things that maybe I'd like to mention. One obviously is our association here with St. Catherine's, and we continue to have that association. Members of our staff, some members of our staff are members of the congregation here. Owen kindly allows us to use the building here 4 mornings a week, 4 afternoons a week, 4 nights a week, and that puts a huge strain on the church itself and their own activities. But in fact, it is bringing in every week, maybe 100 young people from the community who aren't members of the church here, but are actually 100 members of the community who are really struggling in everyday life. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And I know we probably create a mess, and I know at times you're probably tearing your hair out, but we do welcome the opportunity to use the building here. Secondly, I suppose we have been lucky to receive support in terms of volunteers from within the congregation here, and we need 120 volunteers every week because we have a very small staff to work, and those volunteers are being challenged constantly to work with very, very difficult young people. But in some ways, I would say we are also providing an opportunity to be true Christians, because if Christianity is supposed to be about loving your neighbour, and if your neighbour is all mankind, But obviously the real challenge is, can you work with young people that in fact, that really in many cases don't initially appreciate anything you're doing for them, and young people who are very challenging in terms of their behaviour, and young people that the community itself really doesn't have any time for. So that's a real challenge. Our association with church hasn't always been a positive thing from the other side of the coin, because obviously we need to raise $250,000 every year to keep the programmes running. And I mean, within the statutory side of the state here, there is often real suspicion about a group that is associated with a church. Not only, I suppose, on the Anglican side, but on the Catholic side, and obviously with good reason because of the range of scandals that have happened. So we've had to go out there and really prove to civil servants and public servants of what we're really about. And we do want to continue to use words like love, and often that's a word that people are afraid of, but we're not afraid of using it, because we believe that the relationship we provide to those young people has to be a form of love, because that's really what they require. And non-judgmental love is something that Solas Project is very, very clear on. That's what we're about.
Brilliant.
No matter what happens to a young person or how difficult they are, that's the challenge for us.
Thank you, Eddie.
Okay, just one last comment, and I know you're pushing it.
No, it's okay.
Which really is that
Just doing my job.
we also have had to prove to the statutory people that we are good at what we do and that we are effective. And we don't have there's nothing behind what we do except for operating and working in the best interest of the most marginalised members of the community here. So we have to become really, really good at what we do in terms of the standard of youth work and the standard of intervention that we do, and we have managed to prove that. And I just want to compliment Amy, who is our programme manager and has been with the programme from the very start and is really effective, and obviously Louise from our board, who keeps us bang on in terms of ethos. So thanks very much, and I really appreciate the invitation to speak here today. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's incredible to hear about an organization that's effectively raising a neighborhood. Your 15 years commitment to certain individuals, it's incredible. Thank you very much for sharing. It's our honor this morning, as you know, to have Archbishop Welby with us, and I'd like to invite him up just to ask a few questions, if that's okay. So please put your hands together for Archbishop Welby. There you go. Good morning.
Good morning. What have I done?
Where do I begin?
Well,
I'm just curious. You travel the world, yourself and your wife, Caroline, and you hear stories like this quite often, I'd say, or maybe not. We just want to know: are we better or worse? No. I'm just,
well, it varies. They're great, but you.
It's not the first or last time I'll hear that. I mean, I am curious though, like as you hear these stories coming from our United Diocese, and as you travel the world hearing other stories, how could you encourage us going forward?
First of all, I think one of the most exciting things is that you've based this, was that first comment from Maria around the 5 marks of mission. You know, 5 marks of mission, the 5 marks of mission, the Anglican Communion, as you said, go back to the 1980s, but seem to be gathering more impetus recently. And, you know, we've heard they do cover everything we're trying to do. So we've heard about tell and teach and tend particularly, and transform. It's interesting, by the way, the 4th mark is transform structures of injustice and bring reconciliation in conflict. That's really important, second bit, which you're clearly doing. And treasure, the care for creation. I suppose the encouragement would be to say that you seem to be in the mainstream of what the Spirit of God is doing within the Anglican Communion, and it's gathering strength. And one of the most exciting things we can do is hoist our sails and let the wind of the Spirit blow us. And this is Jesus-shaped ministry. So that, I find, it encourages me and excites me, and I hope you feel that here it's doing that.
And I mean, it's in this day and age, the task in front of us at times seems insurmountable. Sometimes it's hard to find hope. Where do we find hope from in these times?
In the resurrection.
Go
and
on.
in the gift of the Spirit. The resurrection, we're the people of the resurrection. Everything we do and say as Christians begins with Jesus. And if we aren't talking about Jesus, we may be really nice people and we may be doing really good things, but we've lost the plot as Christians. And the point about, I just learned this. I mean, of course, I knew about the resurrection before, hey.
It's a good thing.
It's a good thing. But I learnt the impact of that in the Holy Land about 4 or 5 years ago, when Caroline and I were there 3 years, and we went at a particularly difficult time where they were really struggling, but it happened to be quite soon after the Orthodox Easter. And everyone we met from the Orthodox tradition began by saying, Christos anesti, Christ is risen. Anesti eleithos, he is risen indeed. He is truly risen. And I suddenly realized that for them and for me, the fact that Christ has risen transforms absolutely everything. That is the one distinctive. Take out the resurrection, and Jesus could be a great prophet. Put in the resurrection, and he can, in the circumstances of the resurrection, what happened, only be God. And therefore we have hope. And we have hope whoever we are and wherever we are. 2-3 weeks ago, I was in northeast Kivu, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And we went up there I flew up from Goma in a single-engine Cessna, landed on a very steep uphill dirt runway in Butembe, and went to the cathedral, which had a couple of thousand people singing and dancing and protesting and lamenting. The armed groups were right through the city and were fighting 4 or 5 kilometers away. The Ebola treatment center we went to was one of their targets, and was an extraordinary place of life. And you saw the church in the midst of the deepest darkness. I said to them, you are ministering at the gates of hell. That they were worshipping the living Jesus. Where do we find hope? We find it in the resurrection.
Yeah. And I mean, you hear the work of Rob and Maria and Abigail and Eddie, and I mean, this is daily stuff. There's a daily grind to it. I know your work as well. You're very busy. You're traveling a lot. You're speaking, and you're in everything that you do, including believing in the resurrection. Well done. But I mean, just where do you find the strength to continue to move forward? Where do we find the strength to continue to just wake up every morning with the same passion to work in all these different areas?
I don't. I don't wake up every morning with the same passion in every area. And if I'm really going to be honest, which is usually a mistake, I would say that when I woke up this morning, I mean, it's been an incredibly busy and tough week. And when I woke up this morning, I thought, I wish I was at home and could spend the day, Saturday, normally, sometimes, occasionally, being a day off, that I could spend the day doing not very much at all. And not an option. And I was muttering to myself in the mirror as I was shaving and thinking, there was no passion and not a lot of joy. And then I remembered, I mean, this isn't typical of me. I really can do grumpy, and I really can do eel. and pretty sort of everything's wrong, and I'm wrong, and you're wrong, and everybody's wrong, and the world's wrong, and God's wrong, and but this morning I did remember, as I was thinking about this, just to spend some time telling Jesus I loved him, and to give thanks for being here. And where do you find the strength and the passion? Well, quite often one doesn't, and you don't in the Bible. Look at the Psalms, the amount of the Psalms that are angry, cross, lamenting, protesting. But where do you find the recovery? You find it in coming back to Jesus Christ and doing that with others. So when I come in here and see the bunch here, this load of people who have come along and come along because they're part of God's people, and you'll all have brought with you this morning your own particular baggage and burdens of sins or failures or grumpiness or success or joy or celebration. They'll all be part of what you're in. We are the people of God. That's where we find the strength and the joy. With all our muddle and untidiness and mess, we are the people of God, and that's where we find our strength and joy.
Brilliant. One last question. Why do you do what you do?
Because I'm the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Brilliant. Please put your hands together.
It'd be really quite odd if I did this if I wasn't the Archbishop of Canterbury. Hey, good morning. My name's Justin Welby. I want you to gather together. Why do I do what I do? I think because over the 45 odd years in which I've been a Christian, I've known the love of Christ and the forgiveness and the cross, and I've just found that when this is cliche stuff, but like some of the cliches, it's true that when we are disciples of Jesus Christ, that is, to be a disciple of Jesus Christ and go where you're called and do what you're called to do, is simply the best choice any human being can ever make in their life. It's not always an easy choice, quite the reverse. It's often quite tricky, and it is full of awkwardness and awkward people, but that's the nature of the church, and I'm one of them. But it is the best choice we can ever make, and he's there and he loved me, but when I hated him, and I love him, and the best thing to do is just go on listening to what the Spirit is saying and worship and pray and keep going as who I am, because that's where he is.